Church. Sorry, I'm trained as a child protection officer.
He admitted.
I see photos like that and I go, oh, thank goodness it's a baptism. Bill, we walk with you. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing this morning. Next, sometimes I go to Sydney on the weekend to visit this wonderful Czech-born woman in the photo. That is my mum. And this photo epitomises my mum. She loves taking selfies with her kids and her grandkids. And here's 3 generations of the family. That's our Ben, and that's me in January. And as is often the case, take the opportunity while we're there to do something that, well, in fact, it's usually the other way around. We're doing something in Sydney, so we take the opportunity to spend extra time there, so we can spend time with Mum and Dad. And those of you who are the prayer warriors of this church and who pray for my parents and for Chris's parents, our deepest thanks, because it's a tough walk in the last years, and all those times that we get to be there is significant. So there's a photo of Mum. She's praying for this sermon, so it should be okay, because she's a decent prayer warrior herself. But I'm going to move on because she'll be cross at her photos even up there. One of those trips, I took the opportunity to visit Mum and Dad whilst going to the closing ceremony of the FIFA World Cup for Women last year. I say that, but there was actually a game. And that game, I've taken that photo. All these photos are mine up until you'll tell which ones are the ball ones. This was a game that Australia was very disappointed not to be part of, but I do think actually the best team in the competition won that night. There was a bit of action. And actually there was a goal. That's one I took off the replay screen closest because she was at the other end of it. And I was watching at that point. I wasn't actually just taking photos all night. But yeah, that's the moment I struck. Just the moment before she struck the ball for the only goal in that. Well, that was an opportunity for me to go get some food. Now, that was the food I had when the goal was scored. There's a beautiful, beautiful red wine there. There's a Moroccan lamb salad, all kinds of additions to it. That was beautiful. In fact, the food was better than the game. That's hard. Whilst I was eating some more of this, there was yet another attempt at goal that almost sealed the game, but alas, the hero from England saved the day. That was an opportunity to go and get some more food. You might tell at this point that I had been able to snag through a very, very, well, I'll tell you in a moment how that happened. I'm in the hospitality section, in the corporate area, almost directly behind, as it turned out, the winner's box, where they were running on off the field from. At which stage I was far more interested in them. But it was a beautiful night where 2 of my great loves, food and football, came to be one. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. They call it hospitality. I don't think it's biblical hospitality, and I'm not being harsh. I think it's entertainment. And I think it's entertainment because I'm going to walk us through a sweep of the Bible this morning about what I actually think biblical hospitality is really about. And, I love it that people, you know, can be fettered events like that, but actually there's a lot more to life than a beautiful experience at a big game like that. In fact, it felt a bit weird by the end that every time the goal was scored, someone would come and offer me alcohol. Now, you know, I don't drink a great deal because of my immuno issues, but there were people around me who by the end of the game needed a wheelchair. I was with the English, and one of the reasons I got this ticket, right, but you're not here, mate. Oh, I ran an applause for Rod. He has put together 2 PowerPoints this morning on the fly, amazingly. And he never gets thanked for these things. I made a big boo-boo with mine, and he's fixed it up. I think it's probably the battery, but all right, mate, thanks. But I was going to, this is not the friend, but that wasn't the official mascot. That's how close to the action I was. The actual friend, next slide, is my man mate Andy, who I walk with every couple of weeks. He is English, even though he's been here longer than he hasn't. And he makes you wear English hats when you're with him, otherwise he won't talk to you. So hence I'm wearing an English hat at a final that I was going for the Spaniards, and wearing a make-believe English shirt. Anyway, Andy is the man who's responsible for the snagging the hospitality thing, and if you're ever interested in such an experience, I will help you get to know Andy so you can go and do that, because it was exhausting. All right, we're going to have a Bible reading. Chris is going to lead us through that. Next slide, please, Rod. Oh, microphone. Okay. Stand here next to me.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. Oh.
Smith is there.
Hello. Oh, thanks.
It's on.
Thanks. Does it feel on?
Sound on.
Hello.
Next slide, Rod.
All right. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.
So, we won't read the second half of that teaching from Jesus. I'll briefly summarise it. Except to say that this is the last part of Jesus' teaching. It's just before Passover, Sunday. It was certainly according to Matthew. And this particular teaching is, I guess it's kind of it's got a very strong kingdom focus, and it is about the way the people of the kingdom are going to behave. You know, there's a beautiful example of the Good Samaritan as a way of understanding what it is to show hospitality in a profoundly deep and selfless way. This is the reason why we have the sheep and the goats photo up there. And yes, there are sheep and there are goats there. My best mate lived in Malawi for 17 years. I'm driving through the main street of Blantyre and there are sheep and goats going everywhere. And I said, oh, look at that herd of sheep over there. And he goes, yeah, mate, there's a lot of goats in there too. You can't, it's not, in that part of the world, you can't necessarily tell just by looking who is what, but you can tell by action who is what. And that's the way in which the shepherds, the sheep herders, will get rid of the goats. It would be by particular behavioural things that they knew would separate the sheep from the goats. It's a very common allusion that Jesus used here. And he describes the sheep as those who who gave water when it was needed, gave food when it was needed, invited people in, gave them clothes, gave them shelter, looked after them, selflessly. You know, in the case of the Good Samaritan, anonymously, without any notion of repayment. This was, I call it hospitality till it hurts. You might just call it biblical hospitality. But it's a sense that there is the need of the other, unable to be served by themselves, and they are captured by you and looked after by you in a way which is God's genuine hospitality. And it got me thinking, you know, we're about to enter the week, the Holy Week, whatever you want to call it, the week before Good Friday, and I suddenly had this image about a month ago when Mark asked me would I do this, of 4 meals of significance in Scripture, and I think they're linked, and so here we go. It's a rush and it's not deep, but I'm going to show you how it's all linked. The first, right, thank you, is a meal that was actually first recorded in Scripture. It's a meal in the Old Testament in the Garden of Eden. There's some horrendous depictions of the Garden of Eden on the internet. This was not so bad. But the way in which the meal is depicted is a conversation between God, the Creator, and Adam and Eve, the created, in which he invites them into the full pleasure of the experience of the garden. He invites them into the full experience of relationship with him, and he says, you can eat anything you want, except that one, because that's the tree of knowledge, and that's actually not for you. But everything else, I give you everything else. You know, the tree of knowledge, the tree that gives them the opportunity to be godlike, if you like. Now, how is this an example of hospitality? For me, it is God's first move. It's God's first demonstration. He's created mankind. He has the opportunity to set the rules immediately, and it could have been anything. And what was it? Complete and utter generosity. And it was an expression of his character. It was an expression of the complete love that he has for the people on earth. And a thing that was very much comes from him in our direction. You know, it was an invitation. What we did with it, we now live with. Next slide, please, Rob. This is a photo from the 1920s of a fairly traditional Jewish family in San Francisco having a fairly traditional Passover meal at around about this time of year. This is a meal passed down through the centuries, faithfully observed by the Jewish nation. A nation that had been, since the fall, since the first invitation from God, they've been wrestling with the fact that they need to make good, in a sense, and so lots and lots of rules. I mean, the first books of the Bible have lots and lots of rules about how to behave, lots and lots of rules about what you can and can't eat, all sorts of bits and pieces. They're in Egypt, and it's a disaster, and the plagues are all happening. And we get to the last plague, and the instruction is get the pure lamb, the paschal lamb, and paint the blood of it on the doorpost. Otherwise, you will be victim of the last plague, the plague of death, that I am about to sweep through the people of this nation. And that was the plague of the death of the firstborn. And it was the moment where God enabled the release of Israel from Egypt and the oppression that suffered for a long time. And it was then enshrined in this command by God to observe this meal and to observe it in certain ways, remembering various elements of the suffering at that time through the course of the meal. And it's a somber experience to go to have if you get a chance. Messianic Christians, those who are Christians, Messianic Christians, those who are Jewish in heritage and are now Christian, can take you through it in a way which is stunningly beautiful. And I think we might have done it some time ago, but it's a beautiful thing. It is an example, it's a reminder of hospitality. It's an invitation, once again, by God to recall His goodness, to recall the undeserved favour that they got from Him. His faithfulness, His ever-loving, ever-enduring persistence with the people. I suggest it's a glimpse of shalom. At the moment when God released Israel from Egypt, I suggest, we live in the now and not yet. After the fall, the garden is shalom created. We live in shalom, the glimpses of shalom at the moment. We're in the now and not yet. We're not fully restored to full relationship with God. So when God gets involved and there's this moment of hospitality, it is commemorated in this meal. It is an invitation back into what the relationship can look like because of the release from the oppression. It is God saying, hey, there is another way, and it can look like that, and he paints the picture. And as part of that, our fellowship, let's spend some time remembering what it is that has brought about that glimpse. Next slide, please, Rob. Mim's here, Rembrandt's Last Supper. I went hard looking for it, found all sorts of absurd ones as well on the internet. Always hard to find good art when you're looking for it. This is a depiction of the Last Supper. They're far too European for my liking, but that's okay. I suspect they're a little more swarthy in their appearance, but nonetheless, and they may have been they were lounging around a bit here, and there's all kinds of conversations going on, but this is a depiction of the Last Supper. Now, at the Last Supper, they were commemorating. It's a time to start with the Passover, but Jesus takes it and says, and in the starting of the revelation of how God will fully work through me, let's reboot this meal into another kind of meal. So, the night before today, in the week before Jesus died, he had a meal with he had his last meal with some friends just outside of Bethany. I nearly picked up that one, but I went, no, this is way more significant, because this was the meal where he said, this is bread, use this to remember that my body is going to be broken. It will be broken for you. Then he shows them wine, gives it to them, and says, remember that this is my blood spilled for you. And the imagery is clear. It is about him. It is a fulfillment of prophecy. It is these two particular acts are all about God's restoration of relationship with his people being sorted out once and for all. Take away all these rules that have been in place for Israel. Jesus' death is going to cover this all. And graphically they're going to see it in the next week. Horrifically they're going to see it in the next week. So while the disciples may not have got what was going on that night, there's some indications that some of them were so dopey they didn't understand exactly what he was talking about. Nonetheless, this was the moment when Jesus said, not the Passover meal anymore. That was my deliverance of Israel out of Egypt. Now we're going to do what we call Holy Communion. It's a meal that commemorates once and for all and honours the fact that God has sorted it out in the person, in the life, in the death, delivery from death, in the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus. All of those triumph over death. That is the triumph over death moment. So when we sit and have the wafer, which my mouth is drying as I say it, and we have the little sip of grape juice, that's what we're doing. We're taking ourselves all the way back to next Sunday in terms of the commemoration of that victory. Good Friday and the death and the pain and the separation, but then the victory. Yeah? Because he says, so that they might have life. And this is done so that they might have life. That's you and me as well. It's all of us may have life. Not because of what we've done. It's God initiated. Not because of anything that is in our character, because it is God's character booming in front of the whole of humanity here. If it's an act of hospitality, it's the ultimate act of hospitality. It's doing for those who can't do what they need to do everything that needs to be done. Right? Doing for us, we can't do it, everything that needs to be done so that we can get back in a relationship. A remarkable thing. And I am convinced that it is very much Jesus saying, this is the new way. Life in me is an understanding of what it is to live shalomically in the world. If you follow me, you will be that little twinkle of shalom in the world. Next one, very quickly. The Bible has shalom created and shalom recreated. This is the most British of the pictures of the wedding feast in Revelation 19 you will ever find. But nothing else I could put there with anything other than horrific or gaudy. So this is it. Just very quickly, the wedding feast is at the end of the last battle. It's just a reference. I think it's verse 9 or 11 of Revelation 19. But it is. We've got to. I think the next slide is actually. Can we go to that, Rob? No, I got rid of it. Sorry, my bad. Think about the best wedding you've been to. Think about that. And then think about it if it was 10 times as better. 10 times better. And think about it if it was 100 times better. And you're starting to get a scope of what the wedding feast on the last days is going to be like. It's at the creation of the new heaven and the new earth. It's the full redemption. It's when all those who are in relationship with God are there and abouts, and they're going to see it in all its glory. It's not a glimpse of shalom, it's the restoration, it's the recreation of shalom. Because God has been faithful from that very first moment of invitation. Eat anything you like. Wherever you are here is all yours. Just watch that one. And choice was too much. And we've had this cycle through these commemorative meals, and then this is the last one, the full revelation, the full understanding of what it is that God's hospitality towards his people can look like. Rightio. Can I have the next slide? Hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Next slide. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. Next slide. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom, not to serve by the driving lines. And then I'll get to the next slide. This is spoken by Henri Nouwen, a French-Canadian priest, died about 15, 20 years ago, I think. Henri's most abiding ministry, he sold 7 million books. is a prolific writer, a man of deep spirituality, had a lot to say about walking this earth in communion with God. And he's taught at Yale, he taught divinity at Yale and a couple of other places with fairly significant history. But these are his family. They're not his biological family. He's a priest. These are the family he chose to spend the last part of his life, the last 15, 18 years of his life with. The larger Daybreak community. It's a community of adult men and women who have disabilities of some sort. And he chose to spend his time there because he felt he was being given far more in fellowship from them than he would ever be able to give in fellowship and wisdom to them. He said that for the duration of his days. I put Newen up because I have always been touched by this end of life story about honouring you. Because he exercised an understanding of hospitality, which is all about the other, all about living as God in their lives, all about doing for them what they couldn't do, all about ensuring that the hands and feet of Jesus serving the other was always sought, but honouring wasn't the person there. They were getting a glimpse of shalom, they were getting a glimpse of what it is to live in full communion with God. That was what he writes about as the thing that motivated him. His hospitality was not oysters natural, Moroccan lamb salad, beautiful red wine. His was every single day, whether he felt like it or not, whether the person knew that he'd done it or not. He did it. Because that's what he believed. He calls it the call. He calls it the vocation. And that was until he died. Which, for me, is the most remarkable testimony. I've read it a number of times, and I've had a tear in my eye. And what he's doing is he's God's call is on all of us to be hospitable. Hospitable in a way that is like God, is Christ imitating in all its fullness. You know, Henri would say he didn't get anywhere near it, and he's right. But it's a beautiful example of a man who worked till he couldn't at doing that. Next slide, please, Will. So I guess the question for us, both individually and as a community, is how do we express hospitality that imitates God's character, that is in the life of the other an example to them of God-initiated hospitality, something that they couldn't provide. They couldn't do whatever it was, and it was provided for them before it was asked for, or in far greater form than whatever it was asked for. You know, and we have our limits, and God is glorified in our limits. And so when it comes to the way in which one is hospitable to the other, patterns are a great start. They're a great start. But patterns are not a solution. Patterns are the foundations upon which you build that hospitality, that generosity, that kindness, all of God's character coming out in the way you look to the other. I think as a community we have we've got a glimpse of it. We look at the homeless stuff and we go, that's awesome. The garden is another example. Any one of you who sits and prays with the other, whether it's here or where you live or close by, that's an example. We have this beautiful relationship with Burmese community in this, you know, in the shared use of this building, and the shared experiences we have of worship are a beautiful expression of the thankfulness. We have lots here, and they've had very little for most of their life. Is there more we should do? That's not a bad question to kind of chew on, because you know, we would say they bless us amazingly, but actually, how much more could we bless them? Last slide, please, Laura. I think in the end, it comes down to the way in which, as we consider what it is to be hospitable, truly hospitable, what are those parts of God's character that we just hold tight to from time to time? Is it His strength? Is it His enduring faithfulness? Is it His love? Is it His... What is it? As I say, if that, whatever that is, that's the space that you move from in the showing the other through hospitality that glimpse of what it can be. So you speak on behalf of God with the things that you do, the care that you offer, the presence that you give, the presence, you know, the being that you give, the time that you're able to, all the things which you sense God pushing you into, they are, I think, the ways in which we launch out in faithfulness. We understand what the call of hospitality in our life looks like personally, and we move on, and we ask God to give us strength and courage as we move out of the things that we understand about His character into some of the things we might understand less. And still we show hospitality in that way to those around us. It's a big challenge. I mean, it's a life challenge, really. But I was really thankful Mark gave me the opportunity to reflect on this, because, I think we have magnificent examples of the way in which God has shown His hospitality to us, to His people throughout all of history. And the call is for us to now write the next stories, so that people can see how beautifully made they are, and He was responsible for that. Let's pray. God, it's out of your goodness that we know you at all. It's out of the nature of you, who you are, that we cling to you. As we enter this week where we contemplate what it took for us to know that crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, that victory over death, that magnificent victory. Father, give us the discipline to think about things that we can do to be your people, showing your hospitality,